Hi, my name is Gene Arnold, and I'm one of the senior consultants for the TIPCO Analytics team. In this video, I'd like to show you how to set up JasperSoft speaking to an LDAP server. I'll go through the process of connecting the two tools back and forth, hopefully give you some tips that I learned along the way, and in general, give you a better feeling on how easy it is to get JasperSoft and your LDAP server working together. Hopefully you'll learn a bit from the video. I definitely learned quite a bit by putting this project together. So sit back, watch the rest of the video, and hopefully learn something about how to use JasperSoft and your LDAP server. So what you're looking at right now is a LDAP browser, ADSI Edit. There's a number of different tools you can use. I've got a bunch of them down here. What is this? JX Explorer, another LDAP tool. There's a bunch of tools you can use to browse an LDAP server. I suggest you get familiar with a couple because you're going to need to know how to use a tool like this to obviously work with an LDAP server. But this video isn't really to discuss that, and to be honest, if you're looking to integrate JasperSoft with LDAP, you probably already have a pretty good idea of how LDAP already works. So this part would be, I guess, understood. So what we're going to do is connect JasperSoft to the LDAP server that I have installed on my Windows 7 box. Specifically, it is the lightweight version of Active Directory. I picked this for a couple reasons. One, because it is Active Directory, and that's a very common LDAP server that JasperSoft is asked to speak to. Another reason is my demo VM is on Windows 7, so Windows 7, I needed to use the lightweight Active Directory to set that up. Plus, the idea of a lightweight Active Directory service really kind of goes nicely with JasperSoft. Having JasperSoft speak to this other LDAP server, as I read more and more about this, it's very common to have a lightweight Active Directory service alongside with your primary Active Directory service so that people aren't speaking directly to that service. So it wouldn't be uncommon to have this scenario set up. Regardless, it's a LDAP server, and an LDAP server is going to be relatively standard on how the protocols are being used back and forth. I'm by far not an Active Directory or LDAP pro, so I'm sure I'm going to say a couple things wrong, and maybe you already have, but I'll tell you that I'm going to show you this working, and you'll get an idea of how everything speaks to each other. Just forgive me if I'm a little new around this area. So number one, we're going to be speaking to the Super Mega Mart Active Directory tree that we have set up. It's on the local host, and it's at port 60,000. I chose this port because I was doing a number of different practice servers so I could learn different things. So I don't have it on port 60,000 because it needs to be on 60,000 to work with JasperSoft. It's just the port that I chose when I was building this example because, again, I had many examples here to test from. So I don't want that number to throw you off. It's not required to have your LDAP server on that port for JasperSoft to communicate with it. Now, this tree is certainly not the most complex tree in the world, but it is designed specifically to have some cool things in it to show off some examples with inside of JasperSoft. So when I open up the primary root, what you'll see in this tree, you'll have two different country nodes, okay? So I'm using the country nodes here as objects to have JasperSoft say, hey, if someone from a specific country comes into the system, start up another tenant, because I wanted this example to also show you multi-tenancy. So I wanted to be able to show you how JasperSoft can handle multiple tenants, and an easy way for me to do that is say, okay, well, look, let's just have a couple countries in the system, and when a user from a different country logs in, JasperSoft will create a new tenant on the fly. You'll see that working in live. The other one is an area called roles, and inside of this common name section right here, roles, you'll have all the different roles that everybody shares. Could you have roles in each individual country? Sure. In the real world, you may have a very complex tree. And to be honest, the only difference with a more complex tree and this tree would be the LDAP queries you'd have to write to find the information. But the principles would still be the same on how to wire this all together. So I know quite a simple tree, but it should prove out some pretty important points that I want to show you. And I think you'll get some good tips out of this. So this is the tree that you'll be looking at. All right, there's my root. Within the countries, we have employees. We have roles in the roles. And same thing for US. So in this example, other than having the different countries create separate tenants, probably the most complicated, or at least let's just say tricky part of getting LDAP to work would be mapping these roles. All right, that can really be a bugger. And I've learned quite a few things along the way that I'm very happy to share with you, because I think it's going to save you a heck of a lot of time. So I want to go through these roles from the top to the bottom and explain to you specifically why they're there, okay, and what they're going to do when we go and try to sync these roles, or even just use the existence of these roles in the integration between JasperSoft and the LDAP server. So let's just get to it. Administrators. Okay, no big deal. If you're an administrator, you have the rights to actually log in to the LDAP server and do some work. I'm not actually using it for if you're part of this group, you can be a JasperSoft administrator, but you could. I can show you how that could be done too. But there's administrators. And this is also put in by default when you create the Active Directory structure using the wizard given with the actual tool for the Lightweight Active Directory structure tool. So it creates administrators for me. So it's just there. Director. I specifically put this one in here because it's very common for you to want to, let's just say, hide certain objects within JasperReports Server, maybe certain reports or things like that based on a role. So you've got a director role to use, or I can say you have to be a director to see these reports. And you may want to use that also for data security. When you create a security file, you may want to say, well, only directors can see this much data, and if you're not a director, you can't. So I put director in there specifically. Jasper Access. This is a really sweet one. This one I put in here because I wanted to add a role that you had to actually have access to JasperSoft. See, the idea is if you have access to the LDAP server and you can legitimately log into the LDAP server, then by rights of that, you can automatically get into JasperSoft. Now, if you set up security in JasperSoft, it doesn't mean you can see anything. You might not be able to do a darn thing in there, but you still could technically log in. So I thought it might be neat to have a role that you have to have. If you have the Jasper Access role, then you can log into JasperSoft. If you don't, it doesn't matter if you're a director or anything. You have to have that role. So I thought that might be a nice little lock to use. You might use it, you might not, but I thought it was interesting to have. Manager, same thing as director, just again to have different levels if you want to do some work around data security. Map to Jasper. This role is here for another very specific reason, kind of like Jasper Access. You can map LDAP roles to JasperSoft internal roles. So what that means is anyone that has the map to JasperSoft role will actually have an internal role in JasperSoft mapped to them, and not this one. A little complicated. Let me explain what this means. Let's say in the Canadian tenant, you have a role called marketing. And in the US tenant, you have a role called marketing department. And you wanted both of these to always map to the marketing role that JasperSoft has. And you may have another role in another country just called market, I guess. The idea is you could have all these different roles, and rather than having to have all those roles map into JasperSoft and then have you sort them all out and say, okay, these 10 roles mean marketing, so give them all access to this folder, that's just a nightmare. So what you can do is you can map in the different roles from different tenants or any place and have them all mean the same thing. So I put this one in here so that you'll see that when a user has the map to JasperSoft role, they won't actually have this role applied to them in JasperSoft, but the one that this one maps to. Marketing, again, just an identifier. Okay, readers, this is added to the tree by default. All right, so what I do is anyone that has access to JasperSoft, they have to be in the readers folder. Same thing with sales. So the idea of director, manager, marketing, sales, staff and support, as well as users. These are all just for different roles within inside of the system to do different things in JasperSoft. Users actually is added in by default when you create the tree. The final two are important to show. Not allowed in is not what you might think. It's not like Jasper Access. It's not the fact that if you have not allowed in that you aren't allowed into the system. I could do that, but it's not what this is for. What this is for is a specific role that I do not want in to JasperSoft. You may have 30 roles attached to a user, and all 30 roles would be mapped into JasperSoft unless you specifically say which roles you want to be synced in or not synced in. So again, not allowed in, maybe I could have given it a better name, but I meant the role, or sorry, these are all called groups. The group is not allowed to be synced in, even if it's attached to a user. And the illegal format group is here specifically to show you what happens when JasperSoft finds characters it does not like and how it formats it. So that's what the tree looks like. Funny thing, I actually had this whole thing recorded already, and then I came up with these couple different options that I wanted to show you, and I'm like, oh, let's go back and record it all over again because I just think it's really going to help everyone with this information. So this is the tree. What we're going to do next is we're going to just simply go to JasperSoft, JasperReports Server. We're going to log into the system as a user that has some of these roles, and I'll show you what gets mapped in, and we'll take a look at the log files, and you'll see what actually happens. So hang in there, and that's what's coming up next. So now let's actually log into JasperReports Server, and we'll choose a user that has a whole bunch of these roles I just talked about a moment ago, and then you'll see what happens. Well, you'll see that the person can log in. We'll look at the log files, and I'll show you what got processed. We'll log in as super user to show you what happened on the system, and then we'll try logging in as another user with different roles, and you can see what happens with that user. So the first thing we'll do is we'll log in with Jay Smith, because this user has the most rights, and I've added him to the most things. So let's log in with Jay Smith, and we'll give it a shot. Now, just so you know, I already logged in. The reason why you saw super user is I logged in as super user, and I killed off everything in here. So there's no existing organizations, roles, or users, or anything other than what's added to the system when you install it from the demo data. So this is the regular 30-day trial you can download from JasperSoft.com. So the only roles and stuff in this system are just the ones you get out of the box. So let's log in. Does a little processing behind the scenes, and I'm logged into JasperSoft. Now, there is no user called Jay Smith out of the box. There is one now in JasperSoft. It is going to be noted as an external user and was allowed into the system because of the integration between the JasperReports server and my LDAP server. Let's take a look at what happened now. Refresh. So all kinds of cool things happened over here. Number one, it's going to say that I want to try to authenticate with this user. Fine. The next two lines simply say, with that user, apply it to this filter and see if this filter would allow this user into the system. I'll go into the filter in the actual text document that we're using to do all this. So don't go too crazy. The main reason why I'm even showing you these things is, one, just so you see what's going on, and two, the fact that if you add these different log entries that I'll also show you to your log file, you'll get all this meat. So you can go and dig through this and figure out what's going on. So you're going to see the filter being used. You're going to know that it captured the user and try to see what's going on. It found the user. That's cool. It's going to try to bind the user, and everything is good. Once it does that, it's then going to say, okay, fine, I want to start retrieving the attributes, the information about this user. We're talking about the groups, the roles over here. It says it's getting the information for this specific user, all right? This is the DN name, DN, David Nancy name for this user, all right, because it has the Super Mega Mart and the comma at the end, okay? Not the RDN. So this is the direct name, not the relative name to the user. So what's actually happening, and you'll see this in the actual document, is that it's appending the actual server to any of the queries that are put into the system. But let's not go too much deeper than that because it's going to get people confused, and then you're going to see it in the document anyway. Bottom line, we're getting information about the user. It's searching for roles in a specific area. So one of the things you also have to understand is that you may have roles all over the place. So you can set up different locations to search for the roles, and you'll see that in the document as well. When it does that, let's take a look at what happens. It finds information using this filter. It says, okay, roles from search. These are the roles it found. Sales, readers, not allowed in, Jasper Access, map to JasperSoft, a legal format, and director. These, now this is important to note. One, take a look at these names, all right? They're coming directly from the roles here, okay? Okay, director, director. Now the reason why I want you to take a look at these names is because when you use the names inside of the file I'm going to show you later on for the script, you're going to see things are different. Okay, these are how they're set up in the LDAP server. These are how they're actually brought in to JasperSoft, but take a look at what happens next. It's going to try to start doing the mapping, and it has all of these different groups and everything that it brought in the roles. And then look what happens over here. Then it starts saying, wait a minute, external role underscore readers, role underscore sales. Where did this come from? Remember the names. They were sales, readers. They weren't role underscore, and they weren't capitalized. This is huge. You have to know that this is happening here, because later on when you do your role mapping and you're searching for roles, you have to understand that JasperSoft is going to take the roles that it found up on top over here. Where they go? The roles that came in here. Where'd my roles go? Here they are. These roles, the roles that it found, sales, reader, it took these roles and it renamed them to these. Okay? Role readers, rolled sales. Look at this one. You'll see what happened here. Role underscore Jasper Access did not match any regex expressions. Again, I'll show you what this means, but what's important to note is what was Jasper Access for? The role for Jasper Access was being used to see if a user has access to JasperSoft. But I don't need the role in JasperSoft. Okay, I don't want the role in JasperSoft. I already know you have the role Jasper Access because you couldn't have got in the first place. So I don't want this extra role in my system. But the role is very, very important to have because without it, you don't have access. So what this means is that first, we analyze the user and see what roles they have. We use those roles to also see if they even have access to the system. And these roles are of one specific name. And then we can decide, well, now that we know they have these roles and you're allowed in, we'll do our mapping and see what we're going to do with them. So that's really important to note. It's not the other way around. It's not let's knock off the role, not allow it in, but then you can't use it for anything. You can use these roles in your logic for your user search. And then you can pluck them out later on and not import them in. Look at my illegal format one. It cleaned this up, right? It put in removed the space and removed the dot. And also the fact that role not allowed in is, like I said, not allowed in. The role is not going to be permitted into the system. So the role not allowed in and the Jasper access role are not going to be processed even though they're part of the user. All right, and here are all the roles, internal and external roles to be persisted. All the roles that are going to be put into the system. So let me show you something a little bit different now. Well, actually, let's do this. Let's go and log out. And let's log in as super user. Let's show you what happened. Manage organizations. There's my US, okay, at the root. You can choose to have it nested underneath the organization one. You can choose to have it nested anywhere you want. There's all kinds of settings to do everything. I decided to have mine all nested underneath the root so it doesn't change anything with the demo one, and they're all outside of this. If we take a look at this at the role level, here are all the roles put in here. Check out this one. Role mapped in role. Map to JasperSoft. That's the one I was talking about. Notice how the map to JasperSoft role that JSmith has is actually mapped to a role called mapped in role. So I kind of named it that to give you an idea what's going on. Because I had this role, I was granted this role that is actually a JasperSoft internal role. Like, kind of neat. And then I've got my readers and all my other ones. Okay? So if we take a look at the ones underneath US, these are the ones that are specifically here and part of the US roles. All right? So that's kind of neat. You can also see that the difference between these two. The role is defined externally, and here's the one that's actually mapped into the system. External. And then if we go over here to our users, here's our user, J. Smith. There are all the roles attached to him. Notice role user. This is a default role that JasperSoft adds to all users, so you can also set roles that every user gets automatically when they're logged into JasperSoft. And each tenant doesn't have to have this, but each tenant automatically gets a Jasper admin account as well. I'll show you how that works. So now, here's what I want to show you next. If we take a look at the roles Jasper Access, we look at the members, you'll see that F. Harris is not among the people in this specific group. Okay, F. Harris. Though F. Harris is part of the Canadian Country Employees group or structure here. F. Harris. So let's log out and let's go and refresh. Go to the bottom, set a little bookmark. Let's go back over here to JasperSoft and let's log in as F. Harris now. Watch this. No access. Denied. Okay. Let's go back to our log. Look at that. Search for F. Harris using this filter. Need to be a member of the Jasper Access role. And it returned a false. He is not part of that role. So because of this role, so that means this search brought back nothing. So he didn't get in. To prove that out, let me show you. Let's take Mr. Harris over here. We'll get his name. And we will add him to the Jasper Access group. Paste that guy in there. Now my little bookmark over here. Now watch what happens. F. Harris, you can go right in. Isn't that neat? Just because of having that role, he's allowed to get in, though the role does not get mapped into or synchronized into JasperSoft. So if we log out now and log in as super user, and we go to our org, we've got our organization for Canada and organization for US. We take a look at our users, F. Harris with the Jasper admin for Canada, and J. Smith with the Jasper admin for US. Okay, so hopefully that showed you how users log in, a little bit about the filtering that you see inside the logs. But I'm going to get into next, I'm going to get into the actual text document that you have to edit. I'll show you where you find it, where you have to put it in JasperSoft to get things started, and all the things you want to edit within it to make this specific example work the way it works. And again, you'll see a lot of the little tips in that file, because that's really where the meat is. That's really where the things I had to negotiate are applied. So stay tuned. You're definitely going to want to watch that part and see how that all works. So what I'd like to show you now is the actual application context file that you'll need to edit and change to connect your LDAP server and your JasperReports server. Okay, so I'm going to go and open up that file. Well, first I'm going to show you where it is and how you set it up, and let's just take that approach first. So number one, what I have installed on my machine is the 30-day bundled installer. Okay, so in that case, if you have the same thing, it'll be set up in the root JasperSoft directory. Here's my server, and there's a folder called samples. Inside of here, you're looking for the external authentication sample configuration files. There's a bunch of them in here, and since we're working with LDAP, this is the one that we're going to want to open up. Okay? Now, it has sample dash in front of it. So obviously, when you copy this file to the directory I'm going to show you in a moment, you're going to want to remove that. You're going to want to get rid of the sample and the dash. But the file that you're going to want to do all your work on for LDAP is this one right here. It should be in that samples folder. Obviously, you're going to want to make sure you have the right one for the right version of JasperSoft that you're using. So you would, do the whole right-click copy type of thing, and then we're going to want to paste that in the actual JasperSoft web app. So let me show you what I'm talking about. We'll go back over here to the JasperSoft version that I have, and we're going to go into the Apache Tomcat, web apps. The app in question that we're going to want to play with here is the Jasper Server-Pro app. And then in here, there's a folder called web-inf. In here is where you're going to want to paste that file. I already have mine in here pasted. And notice I have the sample taken care of and removed. So that's step one. The first thing you're going to want to do is copy this file, the one that has sample on the front of it, the external auth LDAP folder. MT stands for multi-tenancy. You don't have to engage multi-tenancy in this file. I'll show you that. But you need to copy that file from the samples folder and place it inside of this web-inf folder, this web-inf folder that's within inside of the web app that we're working on. So that's going to be the first part. So I have my application context file that I showed you just a moment ago up inside a text editor, and we're going to go through this together. Now, I might chop this up into a couple different segments because there's a lot to cover, but this is the file, and here's where we'll be doing most of the work. Or actually, we'll be doing all the work pretty much. There's a lot of different areas of the file that you really just don't touch. Okay, these proxy authentication processing filter areas, it's out of the scope of what I can cover for you right now. It's personally out of the scope of my understanding on how to use it. So I wish I could offer more in these areas, but I don't have too much more that I can give you other than using different tools that you would use based on the name proxy to help with this authentication, sending that information somewhere else, bringing it back, and continuing the authentication process. In fact, you'll even read inside the manual that these areas are not necessarily needed unless you're doing some more advanced work. The first thing, though, you will have to do with this whole file is get the proper credentials set up for JasperSoft to speak to your LDAP server. So if we scroll down, we're going to see, let's go over here and take a look at you'll find a number of beans referencing this LDAP context source bean. Okay, so I highlighted that so it'll make it a little easier for me to find. And here it is. The first bean that you have to configure is called the LDAP context source bean. I mean, you're welcome to configure the other ones, but unless you do this, nothing's going to work. This is the bean that actually is set up to make the first initial communication to your LDAP server. So let's take a look at what you have to do in here. The first thing is the actual location of your LDAP server. So you're going to put, and you saw this earlier when I showed you this inside of my little browser over here. You know, here's my LDAP server. I actually right-clicked and I clicked on Settings, and this is where I got my information for it. I just copied it, and boy, do I have a tip for you about this. So I just copied this and placed it inside my file here. But you need to put your information for where your server is. Notice the lowercase LDAP. I don't know why, but this is case specific. It needs to be lowercase. I found that out because, again, when I went back to this tool, it had it in caps. Okay? And it doesn't like that. And just so you know, the error is not, hey, that's in capitalized, lowercase it. No. It just doesn't work until you bang your head against the wall a couple times, but you won't have to bang, and change it to lowercase, and then it will work. So I'm not sure why it's case sensitive. There must be a reason. I'm sure they just didn't do that to drive everybody crazy. But regardless, that's got to be lowercase. So make sure it is. So here's the location of your LDAP server. Now you'll put in the full name to the user and then that user's password. All right. This is strictly just being used to read the LDAP server. All right. So that's all. You're just using this for a user to be able to read. That's all we do in general is read the LDAP server. So you don't have to have anybody with any Uber rights over here. It's just somebody that can actually read the LDAP server. Important thing to note, when we're doing other things with inside of the system, we will be appending, or we, meaning JasperSoft, appends this name to your calls. So though you're going to be adding in the shorter name, the relative name to something, you're actually testing against the full name because it's going to append this. That's all in the manual, but I'm just giving you little tips on things that I found along the way. So first thing you do now is you want to get this file loaded up, and you want to set up this connection. So now that we have our connection made to our actual LDAP server, right? We set up our LDAP context source, and that's all set up correctly. We have to then set up how we're going to find our users. So when someone tries to log in, the LDAP authentication provider kicks in. And users can be searched for in two different ways. I'm using the user search method, which I'm going to go into detail in just a moment because there's more to it. So I'm going to cover the simpler one first. Or you could also use the user DN patterns method. In fact, you can actually use both of them at the same time. You're not restricted to pick one or the other. You could have some users use the more complex user search method because it might be harder to find some of these users because of multi-tenancy and the way you have them nested. And some of them can be more readily found using a straight pattern. Let's talk about this pattern one first so you can see what's going on. The pattern one is really just a direct find them in this location. It's not really as much of a search as it is a go down the tree and find the user. So let's take a look at what we have here. And you can have as many of these as you want in this list object. So if we take a look at this, I'm going to copy this, and I have a new document here, paste it in. Within the country of Canada, in the organization unit of employees, look for this this common name object, this object over here called well, nothing right now, because what we have is a curly bracket, a 0, and a curly bracket, which will be replaced by the login name of the user that's being passed in. So let's go here. We're in Canada, so we have to use F. Harris. All right, F. Harris. But now, by default, we append or add to the end of this the location of our server. So it's DC Super Mega Mart DC Com. So you can kind of consider this whole thing really the path it's going to find. So this helps with a little bit of the debugging, and will also be shown in the logs. If you looked at the logs when the user logs in, this is what's going to be tried, and we're going to look for F. Harris. So let's do this. Again, it's good for debugging and knowing how things work. I've got JExplorer set up over here. All right? And by using JExplorer, let's just take a look at this path. So let's do a little search. We're going to right-click on Super Mega Mart and do a search. Now, within Super Mega Mart, there's .com. We need to go a little bit deeper. So actually, let me cancel out of this. And remember, it's a straight path. So it's actually going to be in Canada, and then within employees, and then we're searching for F. Harris. So let's right-click rather on employees. And what do we have here? .com, Megamart, Megamart, Canada, Canada, employees, employees. And what are we looking for? A CN of F. Harris. So if I do a search, I get a user back. So what that proves back to me is that this path will bring back a user. Okay? Now, if we typed in the user's name incorrectly, or if we're looking for a user that's not in the employee list with inside or group of this path, then it won't work. But if F. Harris is in here and you type in F. Harris, you're going to log in. You're going to log in. And that would make this method return a user, and everything would be cool. So that's one method of logging in, and it's called the user DN patterns method. So now that we've discussed the user pattern method, let's talk about user search. So user search has its own bean. Notice we're referencing another bean. When I click on this, this lights up. And to do the user search, we go to another location in the file, just a little bit further down, called the user search bean. So now in here, there's quite a bit going on. All right. The manual will describe what these constructors do with the values here. You can get into all that within the manual. I'm just going to stick to this. These are not scary and hard or cryptic. They're pretty clear. But we should really get into what's going on in here to make everything work correctly. So one thing I wanted to note, and I put a note in here for myself, this is going to be a standard, nothing crazy, LDAP search string. Okay, so for me to actually get this answer and find out how I wanted to use one, I actually went and Googled LDAP search strings, and there was one on the Google site that showed me how to use the member of call. So what I'm trying to say here, an important thing to note, is that this is going to be a regular LDAP filter, a regular search that you're going to be doing in LDAP to find the user. So this one is going to be a search opposed to the one we saw before, which was a direct line to the user, right? The other one was a direct path right to F. Harris. This one we have to do some searching, all right? So let's take a look at this one and break it down. If we take a look at this specific search, what's actually going on is we're looking for a user that's a member of this specific group in this path. Okay? So it has to be a member of this. If they're a member of that, then we'll bring back the specific user. So what I'm going to do in a moment right now is I'm just going to pause this and set this up for you so I can show you how this actually works in real life, and you can see what each object does and understand that this is really just a straight out LDAP search, and I want to show you this inside the log file, and it really will help you for debugging. So let me go and stop this, and I'll set the screen up and be right back and show you how this works. So continuing to see how this works in debugging this, let's do this. Let's actually go and log in as JSmith. I have things set up now so I can show you how it's all going to work. So let's log in as JSmith. We've logged in. Cool. Let's go back to our log file, view, refresh, and let's see what happened over here. Searching for user JSmith. We're going to use user search, and we're going to search with the following filter. Okay? And remember, like I said before, we're always searching under the supermegamart.com location. That's also important for you to note, because when you set up your connection, if users are not in these locations, you may have to do something different to find your users, okay? If they're not here, if they're in a different branch, or they branch off from here differently, you need to know that. So if you take a look at what's being said over here, we're going to go and do a little copying. Let's copy this to that text document over here. Now, see the and up here? Inside the text document, it's actually this, because it's being translated. Okay, so just again, a little gotcha. You have to put this symbol of what that looks like. It's kind of like a web thing, so you understand what's going on. But regardless, this gets converted to that. Okay, so now within here, replace this with in this case, we can use JSmith. And what are we doing here? We're going to search from here, the dc.com, because remember that's what the log file says. From here, we're going to search the entire tree for anything that has an object category equal user and the name JSmith. That's what the and equals. And it also has to be a member of this role. Cool, right? There's that little thingamabob I put in there to make it only Jasper access people. So let's test this puppy out. We'll copy this thing, and we'll go back to JExplorer. Remember, we're going to be doing it from here. Let's get rid of this stuff here. We're going to be copying it. We're going to be rather searching from here. Remember what the log said. The log said we're going to search for entry under this location. So these are good things to note for debugging. If the user is not under this location, you know it's not going to work. So that's why I searching from here. I'm going to just go and paste in. Now I am actually doing a search. Let's do the search. And there's my dude. Okay? it found J. Smith, and if we take a look at what J. Smith is, in fact, actually the other screen makes it a little easier to see it. If we take a look at what J. Smith actually is, all right, the class, all right, he is a user. Okay, the object is going to be a user, and this user has a CN of J. Smith, and as you would expect, J. Smith is a member of the Jasper Access group. So because of all that cool stuff, J. Smith gets to log in. And that is because J. Smith, this name, satisfied that specific search, to go and search for this user down this path. So that's the difference between the two different methods. I can go and give a straight, direct path directly to the user, or add in a more complex search. Now, again, there are other things inside of here you can take a look at and look at them in the manual. Do we go through the subtree? Where do we start from? All kinds of cool little flags that you can put in. But as I mentioned, none of them are tricky. They make complete sense. It's just understanding how this whole process works. So we talked about, one, the fact that we had to log in to even get this whole thing working, and the context we're going to use to continue to log in as we do different things. The next thing we talked about was the fact that we have to find the user. We talked about both processes of finding users, the straight path or the more complex user search method. So what I'll do next is I'll come back and we'll explain to you, now that I found a user and that user can log in, what about the user's roles and where do they come from? So that'll be next. So now that our user has been authenticated, we need to get the user's roles. All right, so that's a good thing. Let's go find out what their roles are. If they don't get any roles, then they'll just log into JasperSoft, and without those roles synced in, then if you're using roles to dictate the security of what someone can or can't do, they may not be able to do anything. So these roles could obviously be very, very important to be pushed into the system. So we need the roles. How are we going to find the roles? Well, we've found the person. All right, this is all underneath the same bean. We're using this section of the bean to find our user. All right, cool. This section of the bean is going to be used to actually find the roles. So in order to make this happen, what's going on is we're first telling it, remember, just like the user search, there are these different values you can add in there to have it help you along the way. Well, what I'm saying here is that this specific constructor is saying, all documented in the manual, not hidden, not hard to find this information. This specific one is saying, look underneath this location to find the roles. Remember that this is always going to be added to the other main name of the role, the .com super, the DC Super Mega Mart, the DC com. So this is just going to be added to that. So remember that. Within the role attribute, okay, CN, I want you to look for these two things. It needs to be a group, object category group, and it needs to have a member of the full name of the user. Right? So, okay, what's going on here? Let's go to the logs and check out what happened when Mr. Smith logged in, and then we'll test it out in JExplorer to show you how the whole thing works. When our little dude over here logged in, searching for roles for user J. Smith, okay, well, even before that, we're going to look for the authorities for the user. Remember how I said the full name of that user? Okay, we're looking for that user full name, within the specific filter that we looked at a moment ago. In search base CN roles. Okay, a lot of stuff going on. Let's do a little copying and pasting and make this whole thing work. First thing is we'll get our user. Okay, that sounds like a good thing to do. Let's go and get, let's clean this. We'll leave it there. There's our user. This is our user. Not this. This is our user. All right, now, back to the log. We want to search with this filter. So now means we got to get that, don't we? Let's go into here. There's our filter. What happens with the curly, zero curly? We replace that with the member, okay? The member of this group. Well, let's take a look at what that actually means. So let's go in here to our tool. Let's take any role. I don't care which one it is. It can be director. And we have to take a look at the member section. Here's a member. Let's open this up. We'll look at the entries that go into a member. Okay, they're distinguished names. They're the full-blown name for that person, not just J. Smith. It's the whole string. That's why when I said before, it's going to look for a member that has the whole name. Let's go back to our log. Okay, that's the query, and the member, curly, zero, curly, will be replaced with the user's full name. So let's do that. Okay, let's copy this again, put it below it so you can see the difference between the two. And let's take this whole name and put it right there. Okay, that's where we're searching. That's the search. But we're also searching, let me copy this first so I have it here. Search base CN roles. Well, let's go and have a little fun here. Let's go back over here to Explore. CN roles. CN roles. Remember, as I said a couple times, and I'm probably driving you crazy with this already, watch what happens when I right-click and do search under CN roles. It's adding this. So you need to understand that it's going to look for CN roles from here. So if this is not valid, okay, if this is not valid, then this part doesn't mean a hill of beans. You're never going to find this dude here or any of the roles to this person because they're going to look for this roles in this path. If this is not a valid path, then it's not going to work. And I just want to make this clear because if you look at the log, it says search path or search base CN roles. It doesn't say dot or DC equals supermegamart DC equals com. That's just in the manual. That's just more of a given, okay? So you have to understand that you really are not searching just right here. You're searching here. And when you click on search, here are all the roles that he's part of. Okay? And these are all the roles that will get synced in. And to prove that out, let's go right back over here to the log. And I'm going to move this over a little bit and bring this down some more. And let's just do a little bit of scrolling. And here are our roles. Reader, sales, Jasper Access. If you look at all these, you'll see that they map in to the ones that are here. So that's pretty neat. And it'll find all the roles. In fact, actually, there's a better one for you I can show you. Where is it? Let's find the one with the actual names right in there. Here you are, right here. Sales, readers, not allowed in. Sales, readers, not allowed in. Okay. Jasper Access. Map to Jasper. illegal format director. This is a better example. After doing this search, and here's the actual filter that's being used. That's even more important for you. Here's the filter. That's what's being used right there. Okay? You can just copy that puppy right out of here. This is the filter. You can just take this filter right here and run it. Okay? That's the filter. And if that filter works, these are the roles you're going to get. So I'm far from a debugging ninja, but these are important to know, right? Because you need to know where it's being searched for and what you're getting back and how you can trace it back and forth and say, well, I'm looking here, I didn't get anything. Well, here are some tips on why you might not be. So this section covered how we're pulling our roles back. What I'll do next is I'm going to cover the section of how we're doing the mapping of the roles. And that is by far, boy, just the most fun part to figure out. So I want to go through that with you. There's some things that I put in there specifically that are pain points that I'm pretty sure you're going to have within just some formatting of some things. And I think that these tips are going to help you. So we found out where our roles are and what they are for this user. Next, I'm going to show you how we map those roles into JasperSoft. I'd like to cover now the area of mapping roles. This is generally one of the trickier parts of setting up the LDAP integration, or the integration between your LDAP server and JasperReports Server. Leaving out you building something custom on your own. Just talking about working with this file and getting the roles to map appropriately. There are a few little tricks here and there you need to know about on how things work. So I'll cover them for you now, and let's take care of this. So the first thing is I'm going to start with this permitted role regex expression. This property is not actually inside of the application context file by default. It might have been nice if it was there and commented out, just so you don't have to go and see it in the manual and paste it in. But regardless, not a big deal. You just go into the manual and paste it in here. It's right in there. It's no big deal. But what is it? Because it is a big deal. What it actually does, based on the name, it's a regex expression that will let you allow and deny certain roles to be mapped into JasperSoft. So by default, if you take this whole thing out, if this was not here, any role that is attached, or let's say this correctly, any group, because we're talking of Active Directory here, any group that was attached to a user and that user logged in to JasperSoft, by default, every single one of those groups would be mapped into JasperSoft, because that's what the system is designed to do. There's nothing saying that this one should and this one should not. The system is designed to say if Joe user has access into the system, now let's look at the user's attributes. You saw that in the log file. Bring those attributes into the system and map them in. That's the job of the user. In fact, the other job too is, I'll scroll up just a little bit over here. The job is also to, by default, add any default internal roles to the user as well. If we have anyone that's used the system for a while, you know that if a user does not have the role _ user, they can't do anything. So not only are we going to map in any roles that are found when the user is logged in, we're going to map in a default one too, or any other default ones you'd like. So that's nice, right? That's pretty cool. The downside is that it's going to bring in every single one. You may have quite a few roles attached to that user that have nothing to do with JasperReports Server, nothing to do with the security within JasperReports Server that you want to apply, just really a bunch of stuff that's going to clutter up the roles in the system, especially if you're using multi-tenancy, that you just don't want. Okay, so long story short, this helps clean that up. Permitted, obviously, by the word, permitted roles that are going to be brought in. So my roles, though a regex expression is very flexible and really can save you a lot of text and clean things up and become very flexible, my roles really had nothing in common with them, so it was kind of hard to make an expression other than the straight string for what each one is. But let's take a look at these real quick and understand what's going on. First of all, by default, that, right? What is that? Remember, if we take a look at my Active Directory and we take a look at the roles, all my roles, okay, are named this. There is no role underscore attached to any of mine. When JasperSoft takes a look at the attributes, finds all the groups that are attached to a user, by default, it will add the role underscore to your name. Okay? Also, everything is capitalized. You have to make sure you capitalize everything, because if we take a look at the log file again, and let's take a look at some of these roles here real quick. Here, role underscore readers has forbidden characters. What I'm trying to show you here is JasperSoft is looking for roles in this syntax. Role underscore, whatever the other part is, in all caps. Let's take a look at this part. External roles that are going to be persisted into the system. All caps. So what happens here is when your dude over here tries to log in, it takes a look at all the roles that user has. I've shown you that before in the system, where it takes a look and says, hey, here's the user and here are all the roles that are actually found against that user. And it finds them. Just trying to see if I can find it in here. Here we go. Here we go. Roles from search. The user logged in, sales, readers, not allowed in. It takes all the roles that it's found and automatically adds the role underscore to it and capitalizes the whole thing. At least it does that for when we're going to do all our mapping and everything like that. This has nothing to do with that other little thing I did before about the Jasper Access part. That's why this gets tricky. The Jasper Access section I talked about earlier is different. It's the straight DN name directly to the role is in the member of statement, and that's a standard, whatever it's called inside of your Active Directory. For everything inside of this mapping, it's all caps, and it's role underscore. All right? Another thing to note. So we do the appending of the role underscore, but notice we don't clean it up. That's kind of odd. So we add the role underscore, but we don't, and we capitalize the whole thing, right? But the space and the period is not removed. This role has illegal characters replaced when it's actually synced in. Not then, when synced in. Or then synced in. You can say either way, right? There we go. Either way. But the idea is this is where it gets tricky. So I want to find a role. Well, the illegal format, the space, format, period role in my system is actually capital I, capital F, everything else lowercase. Well, no, what I want to find it's actually going to be role underscore, all capitalized, but I need to keep the things that are wrong with it still in there. Okay, so these are the roles that are going to be permitted into the system. Now let's talk about the actual mapping. So what's going on is these roles are going to be allowed to be persisted into the system. The only way they would not be persisted into the system exactly like this, okay, exactly like this, is if they're mapped to something else. Also notice that if you take a look at these in here again, just want to bring this up, not allowed in, okay, not allowed in. Remember I said earlier, this is not a security thing. This is a role I did not want allowed in. Notice how not allowed in is not here. Also notice Jasper Access is not here. So that's pretty cool. So what this is showing you is I'm still using Jasper Access above as a security measure, but I don't have to bring the role in. This is a role that helps me manipulate a user in the way of whether they can or cannot get in, but once I do that, I don't want this role in my system. It doesn't do me any good. So the Jasper access, since it's not open, then this actually wouldn't work anyway, because remember, it's not all capitalized. This role I don't want in, nor do I want the not allowed in role. That's why you don't see it in the list. Okay? See? Not allowed in. Commented out, not part of the list. So, specifically, what's going on over here? If there's a role called, this is the one that comes out of the box. I'm just going to speak about the one I have over here. If the user has a role called role underscore map to Jasper, then I want the role mapped in role applied to the user. So if they have this role added to the user, don't add this one to the user in the system. Add this internal role. Now here's something what's cool about this. This role does not have to be created in the system ahead of time. Just by putting this here, Jasper will actually create the role for you the first time and push it into the system. So you don't have to pre-make all these. You can have them all set up here in your file, and as a user tries to log in, we'll make these. But let's take a look at this role. If we look at that role, okay, role underscore mapped in role, let's go to Jasper. I need to log out and log in as super user. View roles. Let's look at this role. Mapped in role. Okay, look at this role. It's just a regular JasperSoft role. Let's compare it to the illegal format or any of the other ones. This role is defined externally. Notice that. This role is actually part of the Jasper server role. This one is a role that is controlled by your external LDAP server. I can create my own internal roles and map external roles into them, and that's what this file is doing. This is helping me, this section of the file anyway, is saying if I have this role, apply this one instead. What's this thing doing for you? Okay, the pipe star keeps the role at the level of the tenant that it was created in. Okay, that's a big one. Here's where this becomes a bugger, and again, this is something I found out by trial and error. The pipe star in the manual is actually being stated against the Jasper admin user. Okay? If you look at the manual and read it, this will say making sure the Jasper admin user is created inside of the tenant that you build it on. Now, what was happening was when all my mapped in roles were being created up too high in the tree. I'll show you what I mean in a second. I'll go into Jasper. So I was talking to Sherman about this, and I'm like, well, what's going on here? And he said, well, let's try the pipe star. So put the pipe star here. I didn't realize it would actually be applicable to more things than just the Jasper admin user creation. It's actually applying to the roles. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. If we take a look at the organizations. All right. Let's just say, for argument's sake, we didn't put our new created roles, our orgs, underneath the root. We put them here within the organization that comes out of the box. All right, if a user logged in and we didn't have them underneath the root and we had them inside of organization, what would actually happen is that role, though it's being used inside of this org, would be stored in here, or it could actually go all the way up to the root. Now, here's the problem. If you log in as super user, since you can see everything, you would actually see the role. At the root, you would see that role. It would be up here. The role would not live in the actual tenant it was created. The big problem with that is when you log in as the Jasper admin account for this tenant, you don't see the role because you're not super user. You can't see everything. So you log in as a user that you think theoretically got a role attached to them, and actually they did, but the role lives at a level that you don't have rights to see. And that was a bit of a bugger until I figured out what was going on with that. Okay? So understand that that pipe star keeps the role at the tenant level that you're in. So obviously it's mostly helpful when you're doing multi-tenant work. All right, we'll go back to our file here real quick. So that's what this is all about. That's how the users get mapped into the system, and their roles get attached to them by way of first seeing if the role is even allowed into the system. And if the role is allowed into the system, we will see if it should be mapped to another role. And we'll also add any default roles that you want to add to the user when that user is created and synced in. So that should be a good help around how roles work, at least some of the areas that I had some challenges, and this is just important information to know about. Something else I should also cover is how JasperSoft figures out when it should or shouldn't create a new tenant. Okay, there's a section in here for the multi-tenant configuration. You can also comment out certain sections of the below area and uncomment out other areas so that even though you're using a multi-tenant version of JasperSoft, you'll only have one tenant. Now, just like in other areas, I've explained that a lot of these different flags and things are covered inside of the manual. They really are well documented. You can read on what each one of these mean. It's also pretty easy to test by turning things on and off and giving it a run and see what you get and delete what you have and do it again. But specifically, what I pretty much just want to show you here is that when a user logs in, it's going to look at that user's full name and pick out certain pieces of it to help decide how to make the next tenant. Now, in the organization RDNs section, these are all the different objects inside of that name that could be used to create the new tenant. So let's do something here real quick. Let's take a look at this user's full name. Let's take a look at this member right here. All right. Actually, we need to go in a little bit further. Let's go and get the full name of that user and look at it in its whole detail. Let's go and take a look at our employee, J. Smith. Okay? Now, if we take a look at him, oh, actually, is it in that text line? Yeah, it is. I'm sorry. I apologize. Here, let's take this out over here. Copy this. Move it right here. My bad. And cool. Let's take a look at this right here. When this user, J. Smith, logs in, and let's move this over a little bit and put it right. Oh, can't do that. Can I do that? Nope. Wow, I'm just failing miserably on this one section because I want to make this easy for you to understand. I'll put it right here, and then I'll just delete it. When this user logs in, J. Smith has a CN. Do you want a tenant created for every single person's name? Well, you could if you uncomment this out, but you don't want to. So what is going to help dictate the OUs when you're going to create a new tenant? The states? Okay, you get to choose. The DCs? I decided to only let the C value in this login dictate the creation of a new tenant. So when a user logs in, JasperSoft takes a look at this C, object, and says, hey, what's it equal to? Well, if it's equal to US, let's see if I already have a tenant called US already. If I don't, I'm going to create it, like when we logged in earlier as J. Smith, and then we logged in, and that made the US tenant, and then we logged in as F. Harris, and he is part of Canada, and we looked for a CAN tenant. It wasn't there, so it created it. So this is the section that will help create your new tenants. And you'll be able to set different flags here to choose if it's going to be nested underneath the organization _1, or are we going to do other kind of fancy things? Do we want to have it set to a default tenant that everything falls underneath? There are all kinds of different flags you can put in here to change how it's going to be created. They are documented. They really are. It's inside of the application cookbook or the authentication cookbook. But in a nutshell, this is what's going on. When Jay Smith logs in, we're going to look at this area of his full name here, and that's when we're going to create my new tenant. Now, when a tenant is created, by default, each tenant automatically will get an administrator created for them. Okay? User credentials are set up in this specific property that we're going to use here to create our new user, or rather our Jasper admin user. So when a Jasper admin user is created, you can pick which roles they'll be part of, which is pretty neat. Now, this is basically just saying there's another file that has these values in here. You could actually take this out and put your own information in, but whatnot. What we're basically just saying here is that when a new tenant is created, what credentials are going to be used and what users do I want to have automatically created with the system as well. So in this case, I want to have a Jasper admin created. That's what is inside of here. And we're going to create a Jasper admin, and they'll have the role administrator attached to them and the role user. So if you ever wondered how the new Jasper admin gets added to your new tenant, it's this little puppy right here. This is what creates that new Jasper admin user inside of any tenants that have been created earlier. So they work hand in hand. So this is how we handle the creation of new tenants based on users when they log in. The last part of this LDAP video that I want to show is actually going to be covered in more detail in a following video, but I still want to at least touch upon it here so you understand what could be done, because if I don't, I think I'm going to leave out an area where you're going to be wondering, well, how do I handle these different things? And, well, you just won't know. So, again, this will be in more detail soon, but right now, let me at least talk about it. And what I want to talk about is doing custom work around a user logging in. So when F. Harris logged in, something cool happened. Well, a lot of things happened that were pretty cool, but the specific thing I want to speak about is this folder in the repository. When F. Harris logged in, a folder for that user was automatically created, and if you right-click and look at the properties, it'll give you information about it, F. Harris, and the rights for that user. That's pretty neat. So that when a user logs in, they can automatically have their own folder. Where this is very, very helpful is when you're going to embed JasperSoft inside of your own application, and you want to have a folder created for the user automatically, and then their reports are automatically placed inside of there as they use the system. This is not done out of the box. Let's go over here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. On the bottom, we have an example processor. So this bean has to be uncommented. What this is actually showing you is the ability to have your own code work and applied when something happens, when they log in. What this code is doing is it's going to actually be called when a user is created, and there'll be some work behind the scenes done to that user. Remember, the product's open source. You can take a look at this code and open up the source code and see what's going on, but I'm going to go and highlight that bean ID so it helps me find it a little easier in the system. There it is. So when this external data synchronizer kicks off, it does a lot of things. Okay, it's going to take care of getting all of our tenants set up. It's going to set up creating our users, and it's also going to fire off any other processes that you want. So this is an example of injecting a process. We're referencing the bean down below, which is actually referring to the code itself. And it's going to run this code against the user being logged in. Where I find this very applicable is one around the folder that you just saw. Also, this is how you handle user attributes. Let's say a user is part of the sales role, but you have an attribute called region, Mid-Atlantic, region, East, West, Central, and you want to base your security within the data around an attribute in the user. You don't want to have a role for every single location in the country. The role is, well, the user's part of sales. He or she works for the sales department. You're going to use an OU, an organization unit called sales. But within that user themselves, you're going to have an attribute maybe called region. And that region is going to be able to be used in the system security to dictate what that user can see. You'd have to add your own code here. So you'd reference your own bean that would be calling your own external code. So this is not my strong area, but I do plan on getting an example of how to pull out user attributes and also show you how this code is working. Oh, sorry about that. How this code is working. Where did that go? Over here. How the code is working when the user logs into the system, and you can see what's going on. So I just wanted to kind of end on this last little part to show you that you're not done here. You can do anything you want to do, but this is what the file does out of the box, and then you can extend the file to do anything you want it to do with more custom code that you can add to the system. So again, this is Gene Arnold from TIBCO JasperSoft. I certainly hope this small tutorial around setting up JasperSoft and LDAP was helpful. There's a lot more to it, way more over my head. There's more complex LDAP trees, like I mentioned before, custom code that I'm going to follow this up with another video. But the things and the items that I covered were more of the gotchas that I had found along my journey with setting this up. I'm just hoping that they helped you out and you had a better idea of how to set this up. If you want to learn more, as always, you can leave comments within inside of this this file, and you can, or where this is posted, and we'll get back to you on them. And you can always talk to us over here at TIBCO JasperSoft and let us know how things are going. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a great time with JasperSoft.